Hi, my name is Bill, and I'm a subscriber to WTTW Channel 11, Chicago.
The Chicago presentation of the McLaughlin Group is made possible in part by the people of Illinois Bell, putting the world of information at your fingertips.
From the nation's capital, the McLaughlin Group, an unrehearsed program presenting inside opinions and forecasts on the major issues of the day. Made possible by Edison Electric Institute, the Association of Electric Companies. Electricity, it's the power of choice. Here's the moderator, John McLaughlin, Washington Executive Editor of the National Review.
Issue 1. How many states does he have now? Ronald Reagan has finally thrown his sombrero into the ring.
I am therefore announcing that I am a candidate and will seek re-election to the office I presently hold.
Is it likely that Ronald Reagan will get 4 more years? To judge that, the group will now perpetrate a state-by-state countdown. This will give us an idea of what kind of strength the president has as of early February, 9 months before the election. We are not conducting a forecast. I'll read off the names of the states. Jack German will make a judgment call on whether those states will go for Mr. Reagan or for Walter Mondale, assuming that Mr. Mondale will be the Democratic nominee, which now appears all but certain. If a state is probably Mondale's or leaning Mondale's, we'll assign it to Mondale. Leaning means a lower level of probability, Maude, even if the tilt is only 5 degrees.
I think I remember.
I'm not even sure Mondale's going to be the nominee yet.
Is John Glenn aware we're doing this?
The same for Reagan. All states, therefore, will be either Reagan's or Mondale's. After Jack gives his call, if any of us worthies here in the group object to it, we'll say so, and a group count will be taken as needed. On the TV screen, you'll see the name of the state, the electoral votes of the state, and the name of Mondale or Reagan as we determine. You'll also see a rolling count of the electoral votes for the 2 candidates. There are, by the way, Mort 538.
Would you care to repeat all that?
Electoral votes. All right, are you ready, Jack? Here's a chance to make history. Get your face on the side of Mount Rushmore. You ready? Okay, here we go. Alabama, 9 electoral votes. Jack?
Mondale.
Boing.
Bob?
I want to make clear these are all as of today. Reagan.
Jack? Pat?
Reagan.
Mort?
Reagan.
McLaughlin, Reagan. Sorry, Jack. Alabama, Reagan. Alaska, 3 electoral votes.
Reagan.
Jack?
Reagan.
Alaska, Reagan. Arizona, 7 electoral votes. Jack?
Reagan.
Arizona, Reagan. Arkansas, 6 votes. Jack?
Mondale.
Reagan.
Bob?
Reagan.
Mort?
Mondale.
And McLaughlin says Mondale, so Arkansas is, regrettably, for you, Bob.
I don't care.
And
So
Pat is,
totally neutral.
is Mondale. California, 47 electoral votes. Jack?
Reagan.
California, Reagan. Colorado, 8 electoral votes. Jack?
Reagan.
Colorado, Reagan. Connecticut, 8.
Reagan.
I see Connecticut for Mondale, however. Connecticut, Reagan. Delaware, 3.
Mondale.
Reagan. Reagan.
Delaware,
Mondale.
Delaware, then Reagan.
Okay.
McLaughlin is Reagan. District of Columbia, 3 electoral votes.
Mondale.
Yes.
Landslide.
District of Columbia, Reagan. Florida, 21.
Mondale.
Excuse me, Mondale. Florida, 21.
Reagan.
Reagan it is. Florida. Georgia, 12 electoral votes. Jack?
Mondale.
Reagan. Reagan. Reagan.
McLaughlin says Reagan. Georgia, sorry, Jack, is Reagan. Hawaii, 4 votes.
Mondale.
Hawaii, Mondale. Idaho, 4 votes.
Reagan.
Idaho, Reagan. Illinois, 24 electoral votes, Jack.
Mondale.
Reagan. Reagan for Illinois. Reagan.
McLaughlin, Reagan. Illinois, therefore, is Reagan, Jack.
Who are you working for, Jack?
Indiana, Indiana, 12 electoral votes.
Reagan. Reagan.
Jack, Reagan. Indiana, Reagan. Iowa, 8 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
Iowa, Reagan. Kansas, 7 votes.
Reagan.
Kansas, Reagan. Kentucky, 9 electoral votes.
Mondale.
Reagan.
Reagan. Mondale.
Mondale. Kentucky, Jack, sorry, Mondale. Louisiana, 10.
Mondale.
Reagan.
Reagan.
Mort.
Reagan.
Louisiana, Reagan. McLaughlin's Reagan, too, on that. Maine, 4 electoral votes.
Mondale.
Reagan.
Reagan. Mondale.
McLaughlin, Mondale, Maine, Mondale.
It's marvelous that none of you have been there.
I have.
Maryland, 10 electoral
I've
votes.
even talked to some Republicans
Mondale.
there, Jack.
Maryland, Mondale, 10 votes. Massachusetts, 13 electoral votes. Jack.
Mondale.
I'll say Reagan on Massachusetts as of now.
Bob.
No, I'll stick with Mondale.
Mort.
Mondale.
Massachusetts, Mondale. Michigan, 20 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
Bob.
Reagan.
Pat.
Reagan.
Mort.
Mondale.
McLaughlin, Mondale. Michigan, Reagan. Minnesota, 10 electoral votes.
Mondale.
Jack.
Yeah, Mondale.
Bob.
Mondale all the way.
Pat.
Mondale.
Yeah, it's his
Mort.
home state. It's his home state, remember? Yeah.
Mondale, all right. Mississippi, 7 electoral votes. Jack.
Mondale.
Reagan.
Reagan. Reagan.
McLaughlin, Reagan. Mississippi, Reagan, Jack. Missouri, 11 electoral votes. Jack.
Mondale.
Reagan.
Reagan. Mondale.
Missouri, Mondale. Montana, 4 electoral votes.
Reagan.
Montana, Reagan. Nebraska, 5 electoral votes.
Reagan.
No contest. Nebraska, Reagan. Nevada, 4 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
Nevada, Reagan. New Hampshire, 4 electoral votes.
Reagan.
No contest there either. Reagan. New Jersey, 16 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
McLaughlin says Mondale.
It's Reagan.
However,
Reagan.
Reagan.
New Jersey will be
Reagan.
Reagan by assignment of the group. New Mexico, 5 electoral votes.
Reagan.
No contest. New Mexico, Reagan. New York, 36 electoral votes. Jack.
Mondale.
Bob.
Reagan. I'm sorry.
Mondale.
Pat.
I'll say Reagan.
Mort.
He'll say Reagan every time.
No, I was up there.
Mondale.
I was up there this week.
I'll say New York, Mondale, and New York is Mondale, therefore. North Carolina, 13 electoral votes. Jack.
Mondale.
Bob.
Reagan.
Pat.
Reagan.
Mort.
Reagan.
McLaughlin, Reagan. North Carolina, Reagan. North Dakota, 3 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
No contest. North Dakota, Reagan. Ohio, 23 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
Ohio, Reagan. Oklahoma, 8.
Reagan.
Oklahoma, Reagan. Oregon, 7.
Or Reagan and Oregon.
I see Oregon for Mondale. However,
Where did you get that? Are you a Ouija board?
we'll see. Oregon, Reagan. Pennsylvania, 25 electoral votes. Pennsylvania, 25 electoral votes. Jack.
Mondale.
Bob.
Mondale.
Pat.
I'll say Reagan.
Mort.
Mondale.
McLaughlin, Mondale. Pennsylvania is Mondale. Rhode Island, 4. Jack.
Mondale.
Bob.
I'm going to surprise you because I happen to have some information on this one. Reagan.
I'll
Pat.
say Mondale on Rhode Island.
Mort.
Mondale.
McLaughlin, Mondale. Rhode Island, Mondale. South Carolina, 8. Jack.
Mondale.
Bob.
Reagan.
Pat.
Reagan.
Mort.
Reagan.
McLaughlin, Reagan. South Carolina, Reagan. Sorry, Jack. South Dakota, 3 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
South Dakota, Reagan. Tennessee, 11 electoral votes. Jack.
Mondale.
Bob.
Reagan.
Pat.
Reagan.
Mort.
Mondale.
McLaughlin says Reagan. And Tennessee is therefore 3-2 Reagan. Texas, 29 electoral votes. 29, Jack. Where are you going to put them?
Mondale.
Bob.
Reagan.
Pat.
Reagan.
Mort.
As of now, Reagan.
McLaughlin, Reagan. Texas, therefore, Reagan. Utah, 5.
That's Reagan.
No contest.
No
A lot of white folks in Utah.
Vermont, 3 electoral votes.
Reagan.
Vermont,
No contest.
Reagan. No contest. Virginia, 12 electoral votes.
That's Reagan.
No contest. 12 for Reagan. Washington, 10. State of Washington.
Reagan.
West Virginia, 6.
Mondale.
West Virginia, Mondale. Wisconsin, 11 electoral votes. Jack.
Reagan.
Bob.
Reagan.
Pat.
Reagan.
Mort.
No Mondale.
McLaughlin says Mondale, and
Well, you
Wisconsin,
guys-
therefore,
You guys
goes-
are.
You wait.
You are.
You
I'm
wait.
not talking about waiting. I'm talking about the way it is today. It's no contest today.
Wyoming,
Reagan.
3 electoral votes.
Reagan.
And I say, or we all say, therefore, Reagan.
Tote him up.
What?
Tote him up.
I'm going to do that. There you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, our views, let's break them down individually. The final score, first the member tallies. Jack Jamon, Reagan 271, Mondale 267, Robert Novak, Reagan 420, Mondale 118, Pat Buchanan, Reagan 490, Mondale 48, Kondracki, Reagan 340, Mondale 198, McLaughlin, Reagan 346, Mondale 192. Now a group tally. Ronald Wilson, Reagan 386, Walter Fritz, Mondale 152 as of the first weekend in February. There you have it. We can call off the election now.
What you're talking about here, what the real difference is here, clearly, is in the assessment of the extent to which the groups that are polarized against the president are going to carry states. And the one place where I disagree with all of you is in the South. I just came back.
We're going to discuss that, Jack. I might add here that we're going to repeat this this exercise, or whatever it is, several more times between now and the election. Issue 2, Election Watch. So what are the big conclusions? The countdown that we just performed here is a state-by-state review. But what does it tell us about the broad brush picture relating to Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale come the elections of next fall? Jack?
Well, as I started to say before you so rudely interrupted me, first of all, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves on Mondale, although I think it's 90-some% certain or whatever. It is not certain. But the difference here in our perspective is this. I think I am burdened by a lot of information, which doesn't trouble you, John, but the thing that strikes me is that I expect the groups that are most polarized against the president, blacks in particular, and the Mexican Americans in some parts, in Texas particularly, are going to be a bigger factor in this election than anyone else. Big enough factor in terms of increased participation, so that I think that a Democratic candidate is going to carry most, if not all, of the South, plus perhaps Illinois and Texas.
Jack, the difference we have, that you have with the rest of us, is on the South, and I don't really disagree with what you said. It may come to pass that way, but we are talking about what would happen if the election were held next Tuesday. Not a lot of things are going to happen before November, and I have seen a lot of polling data on the South. Not the phony stuff, the real stuff. And believe me, it is not close in those southern states.
The polling data in the South understates black participation.
I mean, if you take that stuff and you give black participation levels that nobody ever heard of, it still isn't close. And let me tell you this, that all of Reagan's polls in the South, for all their poor-mouthing, show him ahead in every southern state. In fact, I tell you this, that it is possible that Reagan's own polls, show him ahead in 50 states.
Pat. Look, I think Bob is exactly right. Look, Ronald Reagan took 10 out of 11 southern states from Jimmy Carter, a southerner. Walter Mondale, when they get done with him, he's going to be weaker than Carter in the entire South. Black registration in the South is up, but there are polls that show white registration exceeds it by a factor of 2 and 3 to 1.
Are you emphasizing that Walter Mondale is not a southerner as is Jimmy Carter?
In the fall, he's going to be painted as he's not being painted now. He's getting his free ride. He's in the primaries. He's going to be painted hard left. And second, he's going to be painted hard left by the Reagan administration. And secondly, Reagan is so much stronger than he was because the old radical thing is gone.
Yeah, okay. Look, Pat, see, I think you misperceive Walter Mondale. I don't think he's going to be that easily painted as some kind of a leftist. I think where macho counts at the moment in Texas and in the South, Reagan is still ahead. But you do have the black registration factor. And one other thing is, I've seen projections of what unemployment will be like in November of 1984, and it's double digits still in states like Alabama and Georgia. Now, if Mondale can take advantage of that and black registration, he's got a very good shot.
Let me point out here that this week Walter Mondale picked up 2 powerful endorsements, Tip O'Neill and Robert Strauss. The Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, said this about Walter Mondale: "We desperately need a president who has the experience, the political skill, and the character, Pat, to be a tough negotiator at the bargaining table," unquote. Now, Pat, you've long held that Walter Mondale is a squish. Are you persuaded by Tip O'Neill's statement that he'd be a tough negotiator at the bargaining table?
That is a very good statement for O'Neill to make because it goes directly to Mondale's perceived weakness, which is that he is a liberal wimp.
John, I spent 2 days traveling with Mondale in New Hampshire this past week. And the interesting thing is that they act as though the nomination is theirs, Jack, that it's not 90%, it's 99%. And you would think that normally, having that perception, they would move toward the center of the road, as Moore says, to show that they're not a wild man. But on the other hand, they are so intent on claiming the victims of Reaganomics, quote unquote, that Fritz Mondale sounds a lot more liberal today than he did at the beginning of the campaign.
You know, the surprising,
he really does.
The surprising thing is that apparently Mondale is not going to play conventional move to the center.
No, he's
policy.
not.
He
Definitely
honestly
not.
believes, he really believes that these disaffected groups are there and that the vote can be maximized, that there are millions and millions of people who are not registered now to vote and that they can be brought out to vote by.
But you're underestimating one thing. The Republican Party is flush, the right wing is flush, the Reagan campaign is flush. They're going to have tremendous attack ads on Mondale, which he hasn't even seen yet. I want to ask Jack the one question now. Look, you're giving Mondale this tremendous black outpouring. I think Jackson's role at that convention is going to cost Mondale support among the blacks in the fall.
Well, we don't know how that's going to play out, though.
But it almost certainly is going to play out. Jackson's not going to be on the ticket. He's not going to be on the...
Listen, we want to tell that.
We're
going to get into Jackson in just a minute, but Mr. Mondale, by the way, has about 100 House members besides Mr. O'Neill supporting him. The second endorsement of him was from the Democratic Eminence Grease, Robert Strauss. Also, Mr. Mondale has raised about $10 million in 1983 versus about $6.5 for John Glenn. Is everything coming up roses for Mondale now? Is it all over? I know that we've speculated. I'm talking.
Well, look, I thought a year ago that Mondale was probably going to get the nomination, and I see nothing that's changed that. I mean, we had this blip for Glenn, and Glenn was not able to deliver on his potential.
Another Democratic candidate is in the news, and in the news big, Jesse Jackson. He blasted the AFL-CIO for trying to coerce voting behavior.
Trade unions have locked us out. When the trade unions, when the Education Association give all their votes to one candidate, it's not fair. I march more picket lines for labor than any candidate.
Is this candidate's strength growing?
Well, I'll tell you, I just spent the week in Alabama and Georgia, and there's a great tendency on the part of conventional politicians, black and white, to underestimate Jesse Jackson's importance. Jesse Jackson is a reinforcement of self-image for black people down there. I think he is a tremendous factor in that thing. There is new polling data coming out in New Hampshire showing him, within the next 2 days, showing him doing better in New Hampshire than people have expected. I don't think he's going to win the nomination, be on the ticket, but he is going to be a big factor in those southern primaries.
But Jack, what I was getting at before is, I don't think there's going to be any transference of that tremendous enthusiasm for Jackson.
No, you mean you
Mondale.
hope there isn't?
No, I don't think he can deliver it. Once he starts tearing up...
Pat, what you don't understand, Pat, though, is the depth of feeling about black Americans toward Ronald Reagan, toward your man. I mean, they are going to come out, even if there weren't a Jesse Jackson, there would be enough voter registration drives, and the antipathy to Reagan is such that there will be a big black turnout.
Let me tell you one thing, that Fritz Mondale is very much aware of the problem you're talking about. And Thursday in New Hampshire, Mr. Mondale was smooth as silk. Nothing bothered him until they asked him what he thought of the Arab League contributions to Jackson's in the organization push, and they tried to get him to make a criticism, and he really got sore. He will not say the first harsh word about Jesse Jackson because he is afraid to death of alienating that Jackson constituency.
Let's leave it at that. Issue 3, will the Democrats board the down payment train? Last Wednesday, President Reagan asked the Congress to approve a list of expenditures by the federal government for 1985-86, totaling almost $1 trillion, $925 billion. Receipts by the federal government for that same fiscal year are estimated at $745 billion. That's a shortfall of a cool $180 billion, which is the looming deficit that we've all been hearing so much about. The president wants the Democrats to put their fingerprints on this deficit. He wants them to join a bipartisan group that would devise a way to reduce the deficit by a quote-unquote down payment of about $100 billion over the next 3 years. But the Democrats have not yet boarded the down payment train. Howard Baker says that if the Democrats don't board the train, they are going to be in very big trouble. Here is the way Baker put it.
If we pass by this opportunity this year with the President of the United States saying that he's willing to put everything on the table and talk about how we get out of this hole, if the Democrats pass that up, I don't think the country will forgive them for it.
Do you agree with Howard Baker? Do you think the Democrats are going to be in deep trouble if they don't get on the down payment train?
I tell you, I don't believe that either party is in deep trouble over budget deficits. What counts is whether there's prosperity. The interesting thing is this is a ploy by the White House, and as usual, ploys don't work very well. It's a ploy to shut up Marty Feldstein. It didn't shut him up. He says, now the budget's out, this is just the starting point. It's a ploy to get the Democrats looking bad. They say, no, now we got to really start raising taxes, and it's a ploy to get Paul Volcker to loosen up on money, and there is no...
Marty Feldstein has again committed the unpardonable sin of saying the emperor has no clothes.
You know what I think
let me make a point on this. The budget, this dingbat budget is so bad on defense that the Democrats have got all sorts of room to march into without putting much stress on taxes.
Just to gloss on that is a 14% increase called for, $305 billion out of a total budget of $925.
I thought we were already standing tall. Why do we need that huge increase?
The thing is, this President of the United States submits a budget on Wednesday, and on Thursday he's calling the deficits that are in that very same budget unacceptable. Now look, he is practically disowning his own document.
Can I correct you? See, the thing is, somebody watching this program more would hear you say that and think that Ronald Reagan said his budget deficits were unacceptable. That was the president's economic report written by Martin Feldstein.
Will, we're going to close this out. Will, let's have a quick round robin, a circuit rider. Will the Democrats put their fingerprints on the deficit by embracing the down payment concept and the consulting group, bipartisan consulting group that the president is calling for? Yes or no? It's a cruel dilemma for the Democrats. Pat, yes or no?
Maybe.
Maybe. That's the best you can do, Pat. No Mount Rushmore for you. All right, Bob.
It's not much of a dilemma. They're not going to get sucked in any Mickey Mouse thing.
Really?
No.
Even though 138 of them call for it in a letter from Reagan? Jack.
Only you take those things seriously, John. No, they're not going to do that. They may do their own thing, but not that.
Morton.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a breakdown of this down payment negotiation, but there will be...
What do you mean a breakdown?
Well, I think that there will not be a big ceremonial signing of a down payment document, if that's what the White House has in mind.
Are they going to have a group planning session to reduce the deficit?
One, at least.
I will go along with one, too. You happen to be right, Mort. You occasionally stumble into the truth.
That's not the question he asked.
Issue 4, is the president being isolated? Lebanon hostilities intensified this week. 1 more Marine killed, 3 more wounded. A 9-year-old girl and 2 other civilians were killed, probably by United States weapons. House Democrats call for the prompt withdrawal of the Marines. The split between the Congress and the president is becoming sharply partisan.
Prompt removal is immediate, right away.
7 days?
Immediate or right away.
There's the Speaker of the House. He's saying that the troops ought to be removed immediately or right away. Who better reflects the opinion of the American people and the merits of the situation? The Congress, personified by Mr. O'Neill, or Ronald Reagan?
I think, unfortunately, that the Speaker probably represents the mood of the country, because there is a wave of hysteria going on in this country on the part of politicians, on the part of the media, on the part of... practically...
Hysteria?
Hysteria.
Well, let me point out something to you. You have the Druzes over there. The Druzes are the principal, or one of the principal warring factions. They're headed up by Walid Jumblat. Mr. Jumblat said flat out this week that Amin Jamal, the president of Lebanon's attempts at peace, were a joke, and he predicted a full-scale war.
Now look, John, that is designed... Walid Jumblat is a puppet of President Assad of Syria. When President Assad gets the idea that the United States can be scared out of Lebanon, that's the kind of language you hear. If the United States were firm and determined to stay there, we would have a much better negotiating position than we will have.
You never disappoint me in trashing President Assad.
I never do.
President Assad. I will say this, that the American people don't care about Walid Jumblat. They don't care about Assad. And I hate to say this, they don't even care about the interests of Israel and Lebanon.
Oh, come on. They will care about the stability of the Middle East.
Let me tell you something. What they care about are body bags coming home. And just a minute, one this past week, and let me tell you that Tip O'Neill not only represents the wish of the American people, but he represents what ought to be done in policy.
It is not hysteria for people to understand that we have no policy purpose with those people in the Middle East, and they understand that. People are smarter than you give them credit for being. You ought to leave town.
Jack, is this a hot issue? Hold on, is this a hot issue around the country?
Yes, it is a hot issue.
Is it the hottest issue?
Yes, it is the single most touchy issue.
Is it potentially, or is it Reagan's principal vulnerability?
Well, that whole general area, except he's going to pull them out before the Pat.
Oh, I think the president's going to pull the troops out, and we're going to have a major disaster on our hands in the Middle East, and it's unavoidable.
So let's close this out with a rapid round robin, and that is this. Will Reagan demand the troops out before the Congress demands the troops come out? Yes or no? Reagan will demand them out before...
Will Reagan pull them out before Congress demands them? Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Mort?
Yes.
The answer is uniformly yes. Predictions, Pat.
The bank debt crisis is going to come back in spades, John, when the government of Argentina, which is flush with $2 billion, just misses a couple of payments.
Bob.
Since your last question was couched in such confusion, let me say that the down payment negotiations will break up in disagreement by the time of the spring.
So there's going to be some negotiations, but they're not going to work out.
That's it.
Jack.
I was really going to predict that Pat Buchanan's going to have a terrible election day.
Quickly.
New polls in New Hampshire showing more air going out of the Glenn balloon. Jackson up.
What?
On February 20th in the Iowa caucuses, Walter Mondale will beat his next opponent by 2-1, and the next opponent may not be John Glenn at the rate things are going.
Interesting. The European Economic Community is in a state of collapse. This is just to change your area of vision, Pat, because they cannot get their act together about their own tariff requirements and financing arrangements. This is going to create world protectionism, not Western world protectionism, and we're going to see here in the United States a much more tolerant ad towards what we used to call protectionism. I'm John McLaughlin saying, boy, that was so long for the group until next week.
The McLaughlin Group has been made possible by Edison Electric Institute, the Association of Electric Companies. Electricity, it's the power of choice. Topics are selected by Mr. McLaughlin, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the participants.
The Chicago presentation of the McLaughlin Group is made possible in part by the people of Illinois Bell, putting the world of information at your fingertips.